Now, 2 years ago, Malaysian Motoring started a video in the early parts of the year saying that we were about to do one of the most important reviews of the year. Last year, we did exactly the same thing. And this year, Perodua has given us 3 for 3 as we take a look at their new Perodua Bezza, now updated with sharper styling, advanced safety features and a whole host of small refinements that have come together to make a far more matured package. Does the Perodua Bezza have what it takes to take on the ever-sharpening competition from the... Let's find out in this video. So we're going to start our little walk around tour with this car, which is the 1 litre G variant. Now for starters, what immediately strikes you are these new slimmer headlights, part of the new Bezza update and standard across the range. These feature LED illumination for the first time, which is not only gives this car a very distinctive look at night, but it also means that drivers enjoy a much brighter view ahead. Now immediately below the headlights is the other most prominent change, which is the bumper. So this now has a much more aggressive face than before, which helps to give this car a more purposeful and sort of squat look on the road. Gives it a very distinctive look. Now with this model, if you look at the bumper, which admittedly is a little bit dirty, you can see that there are piano black inserts along the bumper, around the fog light surrounds at least, again to give the car a little bit more aggression. Also standard on the Bezza are these front parking sensors, again available on every model. Now this car, being the 1 litre, obviously doesn't come with fog lights, but it's just a small change. Now it's also worth noting before we go elsewhere that with this update, the Perodua badge is now a lot more prominent, which most people wouldn't notice, but that's just the case. So down the side, you can see that, again, one of the biggest changes is this side skirt, which is again standard on all models. So it is dual tones. The bottom half is black with the top half in body color, again just to make the car look a little bit more aggressive. Another big change comes in the form of the wheels, because these alloy wheel designs are stolen from the Myvi 1.3 models. Altogether it does look quite snazzy. Now around the back, the changes are a little bit more subtle, but they altogether make a rather large you no longer see the internals of the suspension and so on, but like the front, you also get these triangular motifs down the side with piano black finishing around the side, again just to give it a little bit more definition and a little bit more aggression. And you also get a much more prominent rear diffuser. It's just for style, it doesn't actually do anything. Now for the 1 litre models, it's worth noting that you do not get keyless entry. You still have a key with buttons on it. However, with this car, you do get a What is new for 2020 though is this new Luggage Net, which allows you to keep smaller items in here without it rolling around and making a general mockery of things. Of course, if you need more space, the rear seats do fold flat just like the outgoing car, and they fold flat in 60-40 orientation to ensure that even if you have to carry stuff and passengers, you will be able to do so. Now, in the Bezza 1 litre, of silver trim, which again helps to break up the monotony of plastic in here. The steering wheel is exactly the same as before, however ahead of it sits a new set of instruments, which are now clearer. They're white backlit, so they're this is the G model, obviously this car comes with fabric upholstery, which does look pretty nice. It certainly feels like the sort of fabric that will last a long time, something that is very important for Bezza buyers. And you also get Perodua's proprietary anti-snatch theft hook, which is again standard on all models and sits on the side of the passenger seat. Now let's move to the 1.3 Advance. So now let's take a look at the range topper Perodua Bezza 1.3 litre Advance. So first, there is obviously a new engine, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But a lot of the features that we talked about in the 1 litre are still available here, such as the slim LED headlights, the new grille and the new bumper. However, there are two things that I'd like you to take note of. First, the 1.3 models offer fog lights, the 1 litre models don't. And also, please note the colour. This is granite grey, the very recognizable granite grey, which first came about with the Perodua Myvi and has since proliferated to the rest of the range. Granite grey and garnet red are the two new colours for the Perodua Bezza this year, and this colour certainly makes the car stand out in a crowd. Now, if we move down to the side, you can see that again you still have the dual tone side skirts, just like the one in the 1 litre model, although admittedly on the grey it's not quite so noticeable. But for 1.3 models you now get, for the 1.3 Advance, you now get electrically folding side mirrors, which means that when you park the car it can take up slightly less space and it probably saves itself from getting dinged from less considerate drivers. It's worth noting that 1.3 models also come with keyless entry, however the button is only available on that side. Now at the rear, you get the same changes as we saw with the 1 litre, such as the shark fin antenna, the new boot lid garnish and the new bumper. However, what is unique to 1.3 models is, as I said earlier, keyless entry. And so while there is still a remote key fob, or rather boot lid release here on the key fob, you now also get a button which again allows you to access the amazing 508 litres of space, as well as the new luggage net I mentioned earlier, as well as the 60/40 folding rear seats. Now, in the Bezza 1.3 Advance, things in here are certainly a lot more plush. So while the dashboard design remains the same, it now houses a new infotainment screen which has been borrowed from the Perodua Aros and the Perodua Myvi. So this thing features things such as Easy Connect, as well as smartphone mirroring, Bluetooth, and even satellite navigation, although that said, everybody uses Waze now, right? Now, you also get a leather-wrapped steering wheel in this one, as well as some multifunctional buttons which allow you to change the volume and so on. You also get a slightly different meter cluster for the 1.3 models, which has a 3D effect. I'll leave that to you to interpret. You also get a little bit of contrasting silver trim along the aircon vents. You get some chrome bits around the dials. By the way, it's worth noting that these dials themselves actually feel quite nice to the touch, so tactility in here is quite nice. Now, for the Advance, you get this combination of leather and, I want to say Alcantara, but it's not, because it's not. But it is this sort of suede E-like material with red contrast stitching, which does look really, really nice. Unfortunately, the red contrast stitching is only available on the seats, and it doesn't extend up to the steering wheel, which would have been nice, but yeah, that's fine. Now, the big ticket items with this car, of course, come in terms of active safety with ASA 2.0 integrated into a little set of cameras that live sort of behind the rear view mirror, but we'll get into that a little bit later. However, I think it is pertinent to talk about rear seat space, so let's move to the back and talk about that a little bit more. Now, in the back of the Bezza, so for starters, space has never really been an issue here, but I'd just like to emphasize again just how spacious this car is. This seat is set up in my driving position, and I'm about 5'6", I think, or 5.5 on a cold day. And there's plenty of knee room, and there is also plenty of headroom. Now, this car is intelligently designed, so you get little things like these 3-kilogram hooks on the back of the seats, as well as the anti-snatch theft hook, which means that if you were to put a backpack like this in here, you can't get it out unless obviously you go through all of that anti-snatch theft hook nonsense. Now, being in the back seat, there are a couple of changes that Perodua wants me to tell you about. And that is, first, the bench itself is now a lot more sculpted, so you do get a decent amount of thigh support or under thigh support compared to the previous car. And these back seats, or rather the backrest of the back seats, have been made a little bit more santai by about 4 degrees. And although it might seem like a very small change, because 4 degrees is just 4 degrees, it does make a considerable difference back here because I can sit a lot more comfortably than I used to in the back of a Bezza. And I think we all have a lot of experience in the back of Bezzas because this is perhaps the most prevalent grab car out there. But enough talking about space because we all know the Bezza is incredibly spacious. Let's talk about the drive. And we're going to start with the 1 litre. Now, there is much ado about how Perodua has made lots of small refinements to the Perodua Bezza that have altogether made it a much more competent machine. And that is most apparent from behind the wheel. So the car I'm driving right now is the Bezza 1.0G, which is the base model, albeit this one has an automatic gearbox, which is slightly more expensive. Now, despite the fact that this is a 1 litre 3-cylinder engine, the same engine that is shared with the Perodua Axia, in this car it is far more refined in application than in the hatchback. So this car, for some bizarre reason that it certainly escapes me, the engine in this car is so much quieter and so much smoother than it was in the Perodua Axia. You get very little of the vibration and harshness that is normally associated with 3-cylinder engines in here, and you also get the same level of torque and immediacy that you would expect from the Axia and also from the Bezza, and that is here in good force. What's also worth noting is the level of refinement in terms of noise, vibration and harshness, because as I'm driving around, I'm doing about 75 kilometers an hour now, and road noise is very well suppressed, even on these rather pockmarked roads. We use these roads very often, so we're very familiar with how the surface is. And despite that, the road noise rather is still very quiet and very, very muted, which I'm sure will be something that is very important to buyers of the Bezza in this segment, particularly those who are looking to ferry their families around and so on. They will certainly enjoy the levels of refinement that the Bezza offers in here. Now, of course, wind noise remains a big bugbear with the Perodua Bezza. So the wind whistle that you get from between the side mirror and the window, that's quite prominent. And also if you're at the back, you get a little bit of noise from the rear wheel wells, which tends to annoy rear seat passengers, but it isn't any louder than what you'd expect in the segment. It is still well within reason, and as far as I'm concerned, it is much better than the outgoing pre-facelift Bezza, which I guess is the most important point, right? With Perodua, they like to make lots of small changes and then not really talk about it. And those small changes that they're not talking about are perhaps the biggest contributors in here. So in the previous generation, or rather previous pre-facelift Bezza, there was a concern with the way the car drove. A lot of people and motoring journalists complained that at higher speed, the Perodua Bezza was a little bit blustery, in the sense that if you were to overtake a large vehicle at higher speed, you tend to get blown about. Now, Perodua did their best to try and reduce the effects of that, and you can certainly feel it. This car is now a lot more stable on the motorway and at motorway speeds, thanks to a tweaked steering setup and a slightly tweaked suspension setup, and as a result, this car is now a lot more confident on the motorway. That said though, the sensation of blusteriness, of being pushed around when you're driving at high speed, that hasn't quite been addressed in full. It is, however, greatly reduced. So now you can actually drive this car over long distance at high speed and not be too concerned about being blown about by other traffic. Despite that, despite the suspension tuning and the steering changes and so on, what this car still retains is its lovely, nippy driving dynamics, which makes it an absolutely perfect companion to drive around in town. The suspension is not so soft that it becomes blustery or that it becomes wallowy, but it is perfectly done for Malaysian roads. But more importantly, the accelerator pedal remains as responsive as ever, and the steering, even though it is electrically power assisted, remains as positive as it has ever been. So overall, the Bezza 1.0G certainly shows that the Bezza has grown up a bit. Now let's check out the 1.3 Advance and see if there are any major changes to report. the battery even after long periods of use. Now, aside from eco-idle, as I said, this car benefits because of that refinement. The 4-cylinder in this car is just a lot smoother, and it's just a more pleasant thing to drive. And I feel that perhaps the best way to look at it is, if you drive primarily in town, consider buying the Perodua Bezza 1 litre, because that may be all the Bezza you'll ever need. But if you do drive over long distances, or if you drive on the highway very often at higher speeds, you will want the extra poke provided by the 1.3. However, regardless of which Bezza you choose, you will always be rewarded with a confident drive, as I explained, thanks to that updated steering and updated suspension, which is also present here in the 1.3 model. You'll also be able to enjoy the generous amounts of space that this car offers, both for cargo as well as for passengers, and you'll be able to enjoy the new improved levels of refinement that you can get in the new Bezza. So, does the new Bezza have what it takes to take on the sharpened and renewed competition? I certainly think so. While the competitor does offer a significant amount of value for money, the Perodua Bezza is definitely a more competitive offering. This car offers unparalleled levels of advanced safety assist features. It offers new technological innovations and features that you simply don't get on the competitor cars. On top of that, the Bezza is a car that you can trust, with engineering capabilities and knowledgeability that you know is time tested. There is something reassuring about that Perodua badge, and I know that I'm not alone in this. And if you are the kind of person who wants a car that you can truly rely on day in, day out, no matter how much you abuse it, then the Perodua Bezza might very well be for you. But let me just very quickly place a disclaimer here: please don't abuse your cars. In any case, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, hit the little bell icon so that you're notified every time we make a new upload. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at MalaysianMotoring, or if you enjoyed me, you can follow me at Aiman I Abdullah on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are below to make life that much easier for you. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next video. Ciao!